until 3 o'clock. Okay. So this evening, I'm going to be giving the talk and talking about a figure called Virochena the Illuminator. So we're continuing our exploration of the 5 Buddha mandala. It's a complex symbol or diagram of enlightenment, and it's can be described as it's enlightenment, the white light of enlightenment broken, split into different colors. So, and it's like, the pure experience, the pure wisdom of enlightenment broken into particular qualities, particular aspects that just make it easier to engage with. So we've been doing that. We've been touring around the mandala, looking at these 4 different Buddha figures so far, and each of them has got different color, different symbolism, different hand gestures, different elements of their wisdoms, and we've been focusing in on them. In a way, they're all gateways into the same. There's only one enlightenment experience, or they're just all different gateways into that. They're looking at it from a different angle, a different perspective. So we've been dealing with the language of symbols, and we talk about this, and we talk about it on the intermediate course, that Buddhism needs to speak to the whole of us. It's not just concepts and practices and rational ideas, very important, but for the whole of us to be engaged and transformed, Buddhism needs to speak the language of the depths, we call it. And so that includes the symbols, poetry, myth, ritual, mantra. So we've been dealing in the language of symbols, but also doing that very rationally. We've had a very rational approach. We've been using a list to accompany us, which has been the list of the 6 paramitars, the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva. And these are 6 practices that, well, in a way, they're 6 aspects of the ideal Buddhist, you could say. The Bodhisattva we describe as the ideal Buddhist. It's someone who is dedicated to liberating all beings from suffering. They're dedicated to becoming awakened and liberated, but not just for themselves, but for all beings. And the paramitars explores the Bodhisattva in 6 ways, but also 6 things we can cultivate, 6 practices we can cultivate to become more like a Bodhisattva ourselves. And they're called sometimes the perfections, the paramitars, sometimes translated as perfections. And the last paramitar is wisdom. The final paramitar on the list is wisdom. And that's kind of where we are this evening, and next week we're looking at the wisdom of a Bodhisattva. And what makes the paramitars perfected is that they become suffused with this wisdom, this perfect wisdom of a Bodhisattva. And it's often, when it's described, it seems paradoxical, and it will seem paradoxical to us the way the Bodhisattva experiences the world. But it's said in some Mahayana Sutras, Bodhisattva texts, that the Bodhisattva sees, well, there are no beings. He sees that everything is empty of a fixed existence, and then he sees things as like an illusion or a dream, and that there are no beings. But within that, the Bodhisattva strives to liberate all beings. So it's very paradoxical. He sees that life is illusory, samsara is illusory, the idea of separate beings is illusory, but at the same time, he's deeply motivated to liberate beings. So it just sounds really paradoxical and contradictory. And maybe we'll revisit that later in this talk and next week, the wisdom of a Bodhisattva. So we're focusing on wisdom and Virochena, the Buddha at the center of the mandala. So maybe we could have an image of the mandala and of Virochena. Edward's helping me out with the images. So we've got the mandala, and in the middle, we have the white Buddha, the white light of Virochena, who's known as the Illuminator. And, if we, each of the Buddhas we've been looking at, we've been focusing on a particular aspect of enlightenment and a particular wisdom. When we go into the center of the mandala and the white Buddha, it becomes less particular. It's the white light. It's all the different colors and all the different aspects, kind of black as white light again. It's in a way, it's more difficult to talk about, more difficult for perhaps to engage with, more mysterious. So in a way, we are safer in the language of symbols. Just with each of the talks, if there's something that's grabbed you or a symbol that's affected you, the best way to engage with it is just to be curious about it, allow it to affect you. You don't need to understand it. You don't need to explain it rationally. And the same with Virochena, looking at the image of Virochena. Maybe we're safer to kind of dwell in the language of the symbols with Virochena. And for me, I've been reflecting on the figure of Virochena, the symbol of Virochena, in preparing for this talk. And there's three three different aspects of the figure that have really resonated with me, that I thought, well, I'll just unpack those this evening, hopefully open up the figure for you to reflect on and to engage with as a symbol for enlightenment. So the first of the aspects, well, the three aspects are white light. And they're three different, in a way, Virochena is associated with wisdom itself. And the three different ways of looking at wisdom in Buddhism. The first is as white light, wisdom as white light. And the second one is the lion, the figure or the animal of the lion, the symbol of the lion for wisdom. And the third is of the Dharma wheel, which I'll talk about later, the Dharma Chakra. So these are three different symbols associated with Virochena. I'm just going to talk about those, unpack those this evening. So to begin with, white light. So Virochena is made of white light, and his body is made of white light. He's wearing white garments, and it's said to be like the color of sunlight on snow, so a dazzling, very, very bright, intense white light. And it's hard to imagine on a day like today, which is so muggy and overcast and cloudy, but if you could imagine the sunlight and white light and that intense, bright white light. And we can't really look at it directly. We can't really look at that kind of light directly, unless you've got really good sunglasses or something. You can't really look at that kind of light. And it's the same with Buddhist wisdom and reality, truth. Sometimes it can seem just a bit too intense for us. We can't really face the truth. We can't really look at it head on. We can't really look at it directly. And each week, most of us will have been taking a lot of our material from this book called Meeting the Buddhas by Virochena, a really excellent introduction to the five Buddha mandala and other Buddhist symbols. And he talks about the fact that, well, we've been to the center of the mandala before and we've been frightened and turned away from it repeatedly. And he talks about the experience in Tibetan Buddhism, the belief in rebirth. And there's a book called the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which describes what happens after your consciousness after you die. And it said that when we die, everything's stripped away, all the physical body is stripped away, and our consciousness is just exposed to this intense, bright white light of reality, of truth itself. And it's so scary and it's so frightening that we just turn away from it. We don't want to move towards it. We want to turn away from it. And then it said we see the images of the archetypal Buddhas, the five Buddhas. And again, they're so intense and we're so frightened by them, we turn away from them. And it said our consciousness just descends into kind of lower and lower levels until we arrive at a state that we are comfortable at. And then we're reborn whatever we're reborn as, with our particular, the things that we're comfortable with, our habits and things that we find comfortable. And whether or not you take this literally as being true, we can see it as a metaphor that plays out in life as well. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't want to know the truth. I don't want to look at the truth. And if you see the truth as that bright white light, I don't want to look at it. I want to turn away from it, and I want to just be distracted. And in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there's kind of prayers or verses that are chanted to the dying person or the dead person to try and encourage them to turn towards the truth, turn towards wisdom, to be united with it and become liberated. And they're saying, don't turn towards the dull grey light of craving and your habits and your tendencies. Don't go back to the usual tendencies. Turn towards the white light. And I could do with somebody in my mind just on a daily basis saying, don't do that, Bodhinaga. Don't go towards those kind of dull, comfortable tendencies that you've got, those habits of mind and behavior that just limit you and keep you trapped. Don't be afraid of the light in a way. Don't be afraid of wisdom. Don't be afraid of the truth, of reality, of who you really could be and your potential. Often it is our potential, and it's the light that frightens us more than darkness, and we're more comfortable and at ease with maybe a duller, limited version of our consciousness. We're frightened by the truth and reality, by our potential in a way. So there's this very interesting image of this metaphor for wisdom and truth and reality as being this bright white light. And at this point, I've been thinking a bit. Keep remembering about Satyajyoti today, because her name means the light of truth. So it's very appropriate we have our chair as the light of truth. Yeah, so we have, and Satyajoti isn't scary, and I don't feel like I need to kind of hide away from Satyajoti. So there's other ways that wisdom can be like a light of truth that isn't intense and scary. I was also thinking about times of darkness, and probably you've experienced times of, maybe it's felt like the world's been dark recently. Maybe at times in your life it's felt like it's been dark, but then a light of wisdom, a light of truth is shining, pointing towards the right direction, pointing towards a wiser way of being or living. It's guiding us, it's kind of pointing us towards the right way. So light and wisdom, it doesn't have to be scary and intense. It can also be encouraging and bring optimism and hope and a sense of transformation and change possibility. Yeah, I in this regard, I've got young kids, and I often when the room's dark, they become frightened because they can't see, and then they imagine things that aren't there. They see shadows and things moving or hear noises and imagine. And I used to do this when I was a child, that there's something scary, something frightening. But then if you just have a little bit of light and your eyes start to adjust and you can see the room more clearly, you can start to see the truth that those things that you were frightened of, they're not so scary. And it's the same with reality and truth, just a little bit gradually becoming more and more accustomed to the truth, more and more accustomed to reality, gradually wiser. We can become less and less frightened, the more and more, see more and more clearly how things are. And I think that's probably a healthier approach to wisdom and truth, is that we gradually train our mind, train our eyes to see things more clearly, to see things more wisely. Yeah, Satyaraja, who's a teacher I really look up to, a practitioner I really look up to, lives at Padmaloka. He talks about wisdom teachings being like salt. You don't need to chuck loads and loads of salt in your recipe. I don't do huge amounts of cooking, but you don't apparently, it's not a good thing to chuck a lot of salt in. You just need a pinch, just need a little bit, and that will flavor all of the food. And it's the same with wisdom teachings. You just need a small amount of wisdom teachings, and just let that flavor your practice, let that, reflect on that, let that gradually perfume you and transform you. Yeah, and the Buddha talked about the Dharma being like an ocean floor, which just gradually gets deeper. There's no sudden drop, it just gradually deepens. So you engage with wisdom and it gradually takes you deeper and deeper into reality. So it doesn't have to be intense and bright and scary. Well, if we've trained ourselves, it won't be. Okay, so light, you can, I was thinking of other images. So Shantideva talks about a lightning flash on a dark, stormy night. So you can imagine maybe not too dissimilar to this evening, a dark night, a stormy night. Maybe it's frightening, but then that flash, the flash of lightning, you can suddenly see things, it illuminates things. And he describes the heart of a Bodhisattva, the Bodhicitta, being like this. It's like our mind is turned to darkness, but there's a moment when there's this flash of wisdom and our mind we can see clearly, we can see the truth clearly. Okay, so light and white light. So maybe, just you could reflect on in your groups, or are the Dharma teachings at times, or times when reality seem frightening or scary or daunting, or other times when reality and the Dharma and the truth have seemed like almost like a beacon of light, or a light shining through the darkness, or maybe both at different times. Okay, so that's the first element of Virochena that I wanted to draw out, is Virochena is wisdom as white light. And the second is that Virochena's throne is supported by 4 lions. So again, we've got some images of lions in case you've not seen a lion before, just to remind you. There is a lion. And here is a pride of lions, the next image. So, usually lion, archetypally, symbolically, we associate the lion as being the king, the kind of monarch, the ruler of animals, the king of animals. And Virochena's throne is supported by 4 lions. So I'll talk about that in a moment, but that's, in a way, there's other elements of lions that I've been reflecting on. And I was watching a program on the BBC documentary on iPlayer called Serengeti, which is it's a wildlife documentary, and there were lions on this particular episode. I was watching it with my children, And my son has seen the Lion King, so he knows all about lions. He knows that they're really kind and wise, and they rule the land. And he's a bit confused. Like, Daddy, why is that lion trying to eat all the other animals? Like, why is the king trying to eat all the other animals? And in a way, kings don't really behave like that. Well, hopefully don't behave like that. Game of Thrones, sometimes they do. But why is the king trying to eat everybody? And so I suppose beware of our human projections onto animals. That there's different. Animals aren't humans, and they behave differently. So yeah, lions are powerful. They're dangerous, and they're something against that can be you'd be very wary of. Can almost rightly feel threatening and dangerous. So this again is an image of wisdom. Virochena is the Buddha of wisdom, and he's supported by these very powerful, dangerous creatures, and his throne is sat on them. So I was thinking about this, like, Virochena sat on 4 lions, and I was talking to Owen, said, well, he's the boss, he's the boss, he's sitting on 4 lions. I thought, the word that doesn't seem appropriate now, but badass is the word I thought of Virochena. He's sitting on 4 lions. That is, that's really communicating something. He's sitting on a throne of 4 lions. That's intense. But the lions they're not dangerous lions that are going to eat people. They're sublimated. He's kind of there in the service of Virochena. So then again, this took, the transformation of this raw power, this energy, and it's in the service of, it's supporting the throne of Virochena. So again, it's just, it's a very rich symbol of what wisdom might be like. And then there's the roar of the lion. So the teaching of the Buddha is described, sometimes it's described in the Pali Canon as the Buddha roaring the lion's roar. And I asked Edward, could you help me to get a sound of a lion's roar? And he has got that. So we could just, again, if you've not heard a lion roar, this is a recording of it. So that's just a recording of a lion's roar. But imagine if you were in the vicinity, in a jungle, and you heard that noise, you would stop. You would pay attention, wouldn't you? This is. I need to pay attention to this. Imagine that. The Buddha communicating the Dharma was said to be like that. People just stopped and paid attention. This is something maybe exhilarating, maybe challenging, maybe threatening that the Buddha's communicating, but I need to really listen to this, and there's a real power and energy to what the Buddha's communicating. So the lion's roar of the Dharma. So this is how the Buddha was described. So yeah, that sound that just cuts through all of the noises and everything stops and goes silent and just listens to it. So the lion that Virochena is seated upon. But returning to the archetypal lion, the monarch and the ruler, because Virochena is also associated as being a monarch and a ruler. At the center of the mandala is that wisdom as a kind of, we could see wisdom as an organizing principle, really, a harmonizing principle. So at the center of the mandala, if there's wisdom at the center of a mandala, this is another way of thinking. I suppose I should explain this. Buddhist mandalas are also a symbol for our consciousness and our being. And what you have at the center of the mandala is like an organizing principle for your life. We use the mandala as a symbol for your life and your consciousness. So we're going to have something that's really, really valuable to us, that in a way we place as a central thing in our life. And then we organize our life and our energy around it. And, depending what that is, it's going, that's going to dictate, influence how you live your life. So what we're aiming for as Buddhists, we use this language of trying to place the 3 jewels at the center of the mandala. And if you think of, kingdoms throughout history, if you have a wise monarch, a wise ruling king or queen, it brings order, it brings harmony, it brings kind of peace, it brings prosperity and success. So if you've got the more and more you've got wisdom at the center of the mandala, it's going to bring order and prosperity, peace, success in your life, in your consciousness. So the next symbol is connected with this as well, the Dharma wheel, the Dharma Chakra. So I've got some Dharma Chakras to look at. So the Dharma Chakra is a wheel that Virochena is holding. He's holding it in what's called the Dharma Chakra mudra, or the teaching mudra. It's a bit don't know if you can see what my hands are doing on Zoom or in the hall, but it gives the impression of a wheel, actually, of like momentum and movement, this mudra. And if we see an image of some Dharma chakras, they're often seen in monasteries, outside monasteries. So there's maybe see a couple of those. And it's a wheel with 8 spokes, often a golden wheel, but with 8 spokes. And in Indian Buddhism, this is associated with the wheel-turning monarch, the kind of beneficent ruling king or queen in Indian history. And so there are historical Indian kings that were Buddhist and had a really positive effect on their society. So there was Ashoka, who really transformed the kingdom when he converted to Buddhism. Trisong Detsen in Tibet, which we'll hear more about him on Sunday and Padmasambhava Day, transformed their kingdom when they were a Buddhist ruler. So in his book, Vasantra draws out some elements of this. So the first is that, well, Buddhism is involved with trying to affect society positively, and we ought to be involved in that. We can be involved in that as Buddhists, trying to create in society conditions that are conducive to the Dharma is an aspect of Buddhist history. You look at these rulers like Ashoka and King Trisong Detsen in Tibet, they really positively affected the world around them, made it more and more conducive for Dharma practice. So that's, I think, a really relevant point for our times that Vasantra draws out. But then the second is that often the Buddha and also other enlightened figures, when they encounter kings, it's often very awkward because it's unclear. Usually the king, they're expected, everybody reveres them and everybody bows to them. But an enlightened being doesn't. An enlightened being doesn't rule. A king doesn't revere or bow to a king. And again, we will hear more about this on Sunday, the encounter between Padmasambhava and the king of Tibet. And everybody's waiting for Padmasambhava to bow to him like everybody else. And Padmasambhava doesn't bow to the king because he's from a noble lineage of the Buddha and the enlightened ones. And in the end, the king and all his courtiers end up bowing to Padmasambhava. We'll hear about this on Sunday. So yeah, as disciples of the Buddha, we are joining a noble lineage. We're becoming of a noble clan. This is the verses we chant in the puja. So that's something to reflect on. The Virochena as the monarch, but also we become, to the extent we become wiser, we become more like that. The noble ones. But then, the other point, the final point that is drawn out in relation to the Virochena is king as well. As we become wiser, we're not looking to conquer lands. We're not looking to go on a conquest and to conquer kingdoms and lands. What we're looking to conquer is ourselves. We're looking to conquer our lower nature. In a way, the transformation of this lion, this animal-like energy, that what is very territorial, aggressive, violent. It's a transformation of our lower nature, of ourselves. And the Buddha said it's better to conquer oneself than to conquer 1,000 warriors 1,000 times in battle. It's better to conquer one's own mind. And that really is what we're looking to become the king or queen of, is ourself, to become the rule of our own mind, our own consciousness. Okay, and just 2 other things associated with the wheel. So the second is the wheel as an image of the sun. The Vasantra draws out that the wheel itself could be seen as an image of the sun. Virochena's name is the Illuminator. And talking about light again, the wisdom of Virochena is called the Dharma Dhatu, the sphere of wisdom, the sphere of truth. And it's a sphere that is unlimited. It's a sphere that in a way goes beyond space and goes beyond time. But the implications are that the light of truth is illuminating everything. Everything is illuminated by reality. Everything potentially is illuminated by truth, by the Dharma, but we just can't see it like that. We don't see it like that. So, this room, these people, this lectern, it's all potentially illuminated by reality. We just don't see it that way. And it brings to mind the phrase from Blake, which is, when the doors of perception are cleansed, we see reality as it really is, infinite. But our perception, our lenses aren't cleansed, and we don't see clearly. So So we have the Dharma Chakra as the sun and Virochena as, in a way, illuminator. You could see that Virochena is everywhere and his wisdom is everywhere. It's just illuminating everything, but we don't see it. We're not able to see it. And it was Gampopa, a Tibetan teacher, said, well, to us, it's no use to meet an enlightened person. We wouldn't be able to recognize him. We wouldn't know we'd met an enlightened person. What's better for us is to meet a good friend who is a bit more experienced than us in the Dharma. And it's like the Dharma illuminates them a little, but we see the light of the Dharma, of reality, shine through them, a bit like a kind of opaque glass. We see it just shining through a cloth or something like that. So we need a friend, we need good friends, and anything can be like that. Everything is illuminated with reality, and we just need the eyes that can see that. Okay. And then finally, the wheel is associated with teaching of the Dharma. So when the Buddha, the beginning of his enlightenment, when he became awake, the first thing he chose to do was to share that experience with other people. And it said that he sought out 5 of his friends. He went to the deer park in Sarnath in northern India, and he tried to just communicate and share with his friends what he'd experienced. And it said that initially his friends didn't want to talk to him because they felt like he'd abandoned them and gone off on his own path. But when they encountered him, the Buddha was illuminated by something. He was radiating, and they couldn't help themselves but welcome him. They were just so curious of what was it about their friend that had changed. So they got into communication with the Buddha. And it said that the Buddha then taught them the Dharma, and he communicated to them the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. And he carried on in discussion with them until they were awake, until that one by one they became awakened as well. So you've got the Dharma Chakra, maybe, which we'll look at again, and it's got 8 spokes, and that's said to symbolize the Eightfold Path. And it's communicating, well, it's symbolizing the communication of the Dharma. So Virochena's wisdom, which can seem abstract and hard to engage with, but also communicated in teachings, in concepts and practice of the Dharma, the teaching of the Dharma. So the mudra of Virochena is the wheel-turning mudra. And it said when the Buddha first communicated the Dharma, he set in motion the wheel of the Dharma. It began to turn. And then as the Dharma was communicated from generation to generation, person to person, the wheel continues to turn. And hopefully today the wheel continues to turn, and we are communicating the Dharma still, and that will be passed on from person to person, generation to generation, just the communication of the truth. And the wiser we become, we can't help but want to share that with other people. Ideally, the more, in a way, the wisdom of a Bodhisattva is compelled to liberate other beings. Like the Bodhisattva, the more the Bodhisattva becomes liberated themselves, they want to share their experience to help to liberate other beings. So this is the wisdom of Virochena, the wisdom of the Dharma, the wisdom of the Bodhisattva, which there's this term shunyata, which can mean emptiness, but also the mystery or fullness, it's sometimes translated as. But it said that the Bodhisattva sees the emptiness of phenomena, the emptiness of beings. And I relate to this in 2 ways. One is that the reality is empty of our ideas about it. All the ideas we have, all the concepts, all the labels we use to try and explain, interpret it, it's empty of all of that. It's not that. It doesn't mean that there's nothing there or it's completely empty. But when you take away all that rubbish, all of those ideas and wrong views and concepts, what's there is very magical and full of potential, full of mystery. So the Bodhisattva sees things in that way, empty of all of those ideas and concepts. But it's also empty of the separateness of self and other, empty of that distinction between self and other. So the Bodhisattva sees more and more with eyes of compassion. And so they can't help but share that wisdom. They want to liberate other beings. So the wheel continues to turn because the Bodhisattva wants to liberate other beings through that wisdom. And there's just one last image of the light comes from a Mahayana Sutra, which is a Bodhisattva text, the Vimalakirti Nadesha Sutra, which is the idea of the Bodhisattva being like a lamp, an inexhaustible lamp, which can light an infinite number of other lamps. And that's what the Bodhisattva is seeking to do, is that light of wisdom, to spread that from being to being, from person to person, just to light, set that wisdom and communicate that, spread that light. Yeah, maybe, and that is what the world needs, isn't it? That is what the world needs, is for that light of wisdom to be spread and passed from being to being, and for the wheel to be kept turning. Okay, so that's a good place to end, I think. Okay, thank you.